What is up, guys? Frosty Osty 0232 here today for another Frosty Features. This is our second ever sub-requested Frosty feature. So we are doing a throwback duo that used to be the meta on meta, but, you know, has been power crept a bit, but still totally legitimate, and some war attacks, some Cosmic Crucible maybe. I don't know what you're doing with them, but you're using them. So we're gonna do Frosty features on Cloak and Dagger. What this is a comic book background on the toons that you use in Marvel Strike Force. Let's get going. I have to click on it to actually get it to work. So, according to Scopely really went for it on the description for Cloak and Dagger. So here we are. So, Cloak and Dagger. After witnessing the tragic death of his best friend, Tyrone Johnson ran away from home and headed to New York City. He arrived at the Port Authority bus terminal hungry and desperate for money, which caused him to consider robbing a girl nearby to survive. That girl was Tandy Bowen, who also was a teenage runaway. Just improv that a little bit, but that's pretty close. After her parents divorced, Tandy felt unloved and lost, so she too ran away from home to New York City. Before Tyrone could rob Tandy, another criminal snatched her purse instead. Tyrone impulsively tackled the thief and returned Tandy's purse. From then on, the two runaways became fast friends and watched out for one another on the streets. Soon after, Tandy accepted an offer for shelter from a strange person, and Tyrone went along to protect her. Along with other teen runaways, Tandy and Tyrone were forcibly delivered to a criminal doctor who was developing a new synthetic drug. Every teen who received the drug died except for Tyrone and Tandy. The two friends fled their captors and found during an ensuing fight that the drug had transformed them into superpowered beings. After fighting their way to freedom, Tyrone and Tandy adopted the names of Cloak and Dagger, vowing to protect other young people from the dangers they encountered by any means necessary. Tyrone became a conduit for Dark Force energy, which he can use to envelop a victim and drain them of their life force. The Dark Force also enhances Tyrone's strength and can be used to teleport himself and others short distances. Tandy can generate a form of living light, the Light Force, which she can discharge as light daggers. Those hit by the light daggers can have their own life force disrupted or drained to the point of death. Tandy can also use Light Force to remove toxins, drugs, and other substances from a person's body. They got really wordy on this one. Maybe it's because it's two characters. There's some issues and there's not. We'll get into that as we go through it. So we'll come back to Scopely's description later. So that is what was in the update when they came out. Here is Cloak and Dagger. Names already covered in the Scopely description: Tyrone Johnson and Tandy Bowen. As a reminder, I didn't say it in the intro, so I'm going to say it now. In Frosty Features, we focus on the Marvel 616 canon. So everything we talk about here is going to be in that. Also, I have to skip around on Cloak and Dagger quite a bit because their origin ties in directly with Mr. Negative. So check out Frosty Features Mr. Negative. It has a lot about Cloak and Dagger in it because they get their powers at the same time. So one of the things that I'll kind of address now, I guess, Scopely left out the fact that Mr. Negative had everything to do with their he became Mr. Negative when they became Cloak and Dagger. He also survived the treatments. They weren't the only ones. So there we are. So first appearance, Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man number 64 in 1981. So we see them partnering up with Spider-Man quite often. We also see them partner up with Doctor Strange quite often. So first appearance in a Spider-Man comic. Power/abilities, Dark Force and Light Force. So to point to once again, we're gonna keep referencing back to that Frosty Features Mr. Negative because it is directly related. Tyrone, Cloak, he has Dark Force powers. Tandy having Light Force powers. Mr. Negative, Martin Lee, he has Light Force, Dark Force power, so he more or less has both of their situations at the same time. Tandy's Light Force, it has healing abilities. It does the light daggers do something to people's blood, which lets her massively stun people, but she can kind of hype it up and kill people with it. She has, when they first start off as a duo, they are quite ruthless and they kill people, and Spider-Man tries to reform them, do the Spider-Man thing. Cloak, he more or less has a demon inside, a demon that has a sort of dark dimension-esque thing. It's not dark dimension, but it is a dark universe pocket dimension sort of situation, and he absorbs people's life force. So Cloak is inherently evil, but is balanced out by Dagger's lightness. So them acting together they're extremely strong together. In Marvel Strike Force, they did a really good job about kind of keeping that a thing. When your Cloak or Dagger dies, the other one becomes weaker, more or less. That's how they they're fairly strong separate, but together they're extraordinarily formidable. So yes, so they typically act as a team. Aliases: Demon of Darkness being Cloak, and Lady Light being Dagger. This is really quick. For the most part, they're just Cloak and Dagger. Affiliations: they actually get around quite a bit with a few different ones, but major ones being the New Warriors and Avengers. There are a few other times where they kind of mess with some other people. There's also a stint with the Marvel Knights, but the Marvel Knights aren't officially a team, so there's that. We'll talk about that. Who died? Billy. So, Tyrone's best friend being Billy, they witness a robbery at a grocery store, and when they turn around to leave, they run into a cop. And so famously, Cloak and Dagger also is well known for having representation as far as disabilities goes. Cloak has a stutter, and it's really important that Cloak has a stutter because in this situation, they're leaving this robbery, and this cop stops them, and they get really nervous or whatever, and the cop essentially puts Billy at gunpoint. And Tyrone, Cloak, he's trying to kind of explain to the cop, he's like, yo, this wasn't us, you gotta let us go, whatever, but he's stuttering, and he can't get it out, and the cop gets super nervous, and he shoots and kills Billy. And Tyrone kind of blames himself, so he takes off to New York City, where he ends up meeting Tandy. That's who died. Background: Boston. Tyrone's from Boston, Massachusetts, and Tandy is from Shaker Heights, Ohio. So we talked about how Tyrone got to New York City. Tandy, her father and mother, they split off because her dad wanted to find himself. He went to India, I believe. Let's see if I put that in the notes. Pretty sure it's India. He goes off to learn spiritual enlightenment and leaves everything to the mother, and she gets remarried and has a stepfather. Her stepfather's fine, but she's not feeling, she's feeling very neglected from her real father, and then she has this boyfriend who goes off to college, so she feels extra lonely, so she gets all, hers isn't near as moving as Tyrone's, but so, anyways, she feels really left out or whatever. Completely valid that she was feeling lonely and such, but then she runs away to New York, where Tyrone is considering, he's kind of starving to death at this bus stop, and he decides to resort to robbery. And he decides he's going to rob her because she looks like a rich girl, which she is. And in attempting to do so, she started to get robbed by somebody else. Tyrone tackles the hell out of him, and she's like, "Oh, let me buy you some food." And then from then on, they were inseparable. And then human trafficked when Tandy is looking for a place for them to stay, and some creepy dude comes up and offers them shelter, and Tyrone goes with her to protect her, and they both end up experiments of the Magia gang, which we talk about in Frosty Features, Mr. Negative. But we'll talk about it more because obviously it's their origin. Yay! D-Light and D-Spare. So the Magia, once again, reiterations from my previous one, but D-Lite is a heroin replacement that the Magia, M-A-G-G-I-A gang is making to replace heroin. They're trying to kind of corner their market. It's a designer drug, and they use runaway teens, and they use like imported. They kidnap people off of ships, like stowaways or refugees. They use them, and they experiment on them with these drugs, right? So they're killing everybody, and then. So we get to Cloak and Dagger and Martin Lee, and they use the drugs on them, and there's a lot of stuff, but there's magical interference, and there's a mutant genes, a mutated gene, maybe not mutant genes. It activates their mutation, and this god, this fear god, Despair, he also takes an interest in the situation going on, and he sees the potential for their mutant genes, and he magically influences the drug to kind of alter their mutant genes, so their powers come out a little different. But ultimately, due to both magic and comic science, they get their powers, as well as Martin Lee. All three escape together, and find out after they survive, they escape, and then they find out that they have powers. And boomskis, woomskis, you got Cloak and Dagger. So mutants, depends on who you ask. The Marvel canon cannot make up their mind on Cloak and Dagger. It has been pointed out multiple times that they have mutant genes, and then other times it says they are just they're just superhuman. Different sources, Captain America, some other people, they go back and forth on whether or not these two are actually, whether or not they're actually factually mutants. And they're not just like regular super powered individuals. The whole reason why, we'll go into Despair a little bit, but a lot of the reason why Despair took interest in the situation was because they were mutants. But for some reason in the comic book community, this isn't just the people who read. The writers go back and forth and will literally point out in canon that they're not mutants, and then go back, other writers will go back and be like, but they are mutants. And then it happens over and over and over. They have all these different marrow tests and blood tests that they do, and yes, they're mutants. Beast recommends a marrow test. It's a whole thing. They go back and forth constantly. So it is debatable, yes, that Cloak and Dagger are mutants. I think it leans towards them being mutants, and in canon, for sure, Tandy's dad is a mutant. So there you have it. It's not proof, but it's good leaning. It's super confusing. But we are going to talk about them as mutants because their entire background, where they got their powers and stuff like that, actually really relies on the fact that they're mutants, and you'll see why in a minute. So, relationships. Nathan Tyler. This is Tandy Bowen's natural born father. Melissa and Philip Carlisle are the mother and stepfather of Tandy Bowen, of Dagger. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, Cloak's parents. So, Cloak's parents aren't actually named. I couldn't find them. I didn't know them offhand, and so I tried to look them up, and I couldn't find them. I think in the show Cloak and Dagger they have names, but we don't do that here. But in the comics, as far as I can tell, they're just Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. Also in the comics, Tyrone has 2 sisters and 1 brother, which is the brother being Otis, and then his sister. He's got a sister that is unnamed. That like a demon, like more or less a demon, is like, yo. After you left Boston, your brother went bad and got your sister hooked on drugs, and she overdosed and killed herself, and your brother's out running around. And that's it. But it's the source was from a demon, and they never went back to fact check that, as far as I know. So that's what happened to his main siblings. And then Anna Johnson is actually Tyrone's twin sister, but she's long lost, and they didn't know. They didn't know they were brother and sister, but still counts. All right. Notable events: the Marvel Knights and Despair. So let's talk about Marvel Knights. So in the Marvel Knights situation, Marvel Knights is famously it is a team name that even non-comic book readers might recognize. The run was very popular. It's a big thing. But in the Marvel canon, they do not refer to themselves as Marvel Knights. In fact, they are known as Daredevil's unnamed team. But ultimately, a rock troll from Asgard was looking for a device, an ancient artifact or whatever, and he's murdering lots of people. And Daredevil's like, yeah, we can't have that. And he assembles this team, and Moon Knight's like, I like what you're doing here. I'm going to fund you. And they make this team, and they go down and they take it out. So anyway, yeah, the way Cloak and Dagger come involved is Cloak goes missing. Cloak battles with his demon a lot, the Predator. Cloak deals with him a lot. He kind of becomes evil a lot, especially when he's separate from Dagger. He kind of leans towards evil tendencies or whatever. So Cloak goes missing. Dagger is trying to figure out what to do, and she ends up working with Daredevil's unnamed team, the Marvel Knights. And some people start going missing, and the Predator essentially convinces Cloak that he needs to absorb life. So Cloak goes back and forth whether or not he should kill people. His power drains life force, right? So the Predator more or less convinces him to takes control of him, because Nightmare, who's a really cool villain, Doctor Strange villain most of the time, really big deal, Nightmare takes control of Tyrone, and then he's much more, because of that, he's much more susceptible to the Predator. The Predator's like, you need to kill anyone who breaks the law. And you know who breaks the law? Vigilantes, right? So he starts absorbing vigilantes, and so with the Marvel Knights, people start going missing. The Marvel Knights are investigating. Daredevil, Black Widow, and Moon Knight eventually all get absorbed by Cloak, and Dagger's like, this has to be Cloak, this is crazy, I need to do something about this. She seeks out my boy, probably one of my favorite Marvel characters, Doctor Strange. She's like, dude, what do we do about this? And he was like, there's something hinky about this, let me look into this. And then them two kind of teamed up. They purged Cloak of Predator and Nightmare, and Doctor Strange is like, boy, I know how to handle you, Nightmare, let's go. And they take him out. Cloak returns to Dagger and gets his sanity back. Boomski shoomskis, we're good, right? So that's a really cool one. I like the Marvel Knights. Yes. So next is Despair. So Despair is a fear god. He is essentially the kind of embodiment of light force and dark force. Cloak and Dagger are fighting a group of cultists when they save this homeless girl from being kind of attacked or absorbed into the cult, and that homeless girl ends up being Anna Johnson, who, as I said earlier, is Cloak's long lost twin sister. This is where they're fighting demons, and Tyrone finds out that supposedly his brother got into drugs really hard, got a sister hooked, and his sister's dead. But once again, we don't know about that. But Despair is magical influence. He is kind of looking over anything. He's a god outside of our realm, really big controller of the light and dark force, and he sees that Martin Lee, he sees Tandy, and he sees Tyrone getting experimented on, and he sees the mutant genes inside them. Despair is fueled by the agony and suffering of people, and he sees that they have mutant genes even though they may not realize it, and mutants tend towards misery. They attract, in his logic, they attract negative emotions, and due to their mutated genes, they would be a perfect battery for him to store some of his power and come back and get later. So he points out that they would have had different mutations if he would have left them alone, but them running into each other, the mutations would have come out eventually, so it may have been similar, but he used a little bit of magic, and he more or less charged Dagger with light force, and he charged Tyrone with dark force, leaving Martin Lee to catch a little bit of both, and he intended to use them as batteries later. So when he comes to collect on that, it doesn't quite go as he thinks, and Cloak and Dagger turn around and they freaking decimate this god. Just turn around and destroy his face. And it seems like he's dead, but of course he's not, because comics. So yeah, that's sort of, he uses his magical influence to get them. So not only would they technically be mutants, once again, depending on which writer you ask, but also they are mystic. So that's very important, because they do deal with, like I said, they deal with Doctor Strange. In this situation where they fight Despair, they also have Doctor Strange in their pocket. But they deal with the mystic arts a lot. They work with the X-Men all the time. It's a big thing, but everybody goes back and forth on it. So Marvel Strike Force does not care about power scaling, but I do. So the way we do power scaling over here at Frosty Features, multiversal means you can end all of reality, not only as we know it, but as everybody knows it. You could end all existence at once. More than one dimension. Erased. Boomskis, gonskis. That's what we're doing. Universal means you are a threat to maybe your universe, your dimension. You could hop over to another one and possibly end it there as well, but not all of reality everywhere. Cosmic threat means on the small end, you are a threat to a planetary body, and if you make your way around, you could take out a small solar system or maybe a galaxy. Nuclear means on the small end, you are taking out a small city up to a planetary body. You essentially have the power similar to a nuclear bomb. I forgot to add super soldier in here. Oh no. So super soldier, the base is Captain America. It's missing here, but that's where it is. You're similar to like Captain America. You could take out a brick wall, maybe a building with enough attempt. You are beyond the capabilities of a human. City level, you are at the very tippy top of the capabilities of a human. You are essentially the highest level of athlete. You are super trained. You are super skilled. And then there's Greg. Greg is the undead Asgardian that Hela spawns in Marvel Strike Force, and he used to be super weak, so I use him as an example, but for the sake of argument, we're going to say Greg is regular old human power level, and if I had a wooden bat wrapped in gummy worms and I had a lot of determination, I theoretically could take out Greg. So in the case of Tandy Bowen and Tyrone Johnson, Cloak and Dagger, I would rate them at a nuclear level. They have the potential to easily be cosmic, but they definitely can, especially when working together. They can take out large groups of people at once, up to not only murdering people, but even in the situation where they take on things like gods in and also they take on the likes of people like Thanos and win. So they are quite strong. Like I said, low end, their actual accomplishments haven't shown them. I assume that they're stronger than this, but what you can see is some massive effects, especially when used together. They are quite the duo. So nuclear level 100% for maybe even cosmic, nuclear 0.5 if you will, for Cloak and Dagger. And as for, I forgot to animate it, sorry. As for my according to Scopely, nice try Scopely. They got pretty close as far as a lot of this stuff. They left out Martin Lee for some reason. I feel like they undersold Tyrone's friend being killed. Yeah, saying they were the only ones that lived, that's not true. They also we had a Martin Lee live. Yes, so they got pretty close. They had a really nice description. They just left out things as it was. Also, Tandy Bowen, she didn't just run away because of her parents' divorce. She had a lot of other reasons why she ran away. That was sort of shoehorning it in. So it was an all right description on the end of Scopely. So that is Frosty Features, Cloak and Dagger. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what I missed in the comments. I had to skip around a lot because it's funny because like they don't directly deal with Mr. Negative, but their story is so rooted in Mr. Negative. So please, if you're interested in more Cloak and Dagger, check out Frosty Features at Mr. Negative. It's a big deal. There's a whole arc where Mr. Negative controls Cloak and Dagger, and I already talked about it. So please check that out. If there's something else that I missed or something that you liked a lot, let me know in the comments. I really would appreciate it. As a reminder, I stream every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time at the link above. On Twitch, please come follow. I would love to see you in chat. We do Frosty Features live. Also, like, follow, share, subscribe here on YouTube. Really would appreciate that. Yeah, that's some cool stuff. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all have a fantastic week. And most importantly, y'all, stay cool.